Hello, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Wednesday, the 10th of May. Glad to see you here. I'd like to share with you the reflection from our daily bread from Monday, the 8th of May. It said the quote here from Scripture begins with, "Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you." That's from the third verse from the first chapter of Luke. And this is written by Sheridan Voisey, the reflection. So it says here, "A woman once told me about a disagreement that was tearing her church apart. 'What's the disagreement about?' I asked. 'Whether the earth is flat,' she said. A few months later, news broke of a Christian man who'd burst into a restaurant armed to rescue children supposedly being abused in its back room. There was no back room, and the man was arrested. In both cases, the people involved were acting on conspiracy theories they'd read on the internet. Believers in Jesus are called to be good citizens, and good citizens don't spread misinformation. In Luke's day, numerous stories circulated about Jesus. Some of them were inaccurate stories circulated. Instead of passing on everything he heard, Luke decided to essentially become an investigative journalist, talking to eyewitnesses, researching everything from the beginning, and writing his findings into a gospel that contains names, quotes, and historical facts based on people with firsthand knowledge, not unverified claims. We can do the same. Since false information can split churches and put lives at risk, checking facts is an act of loving our neighbor. When a sensational story comes our way, we can verify its claims with qualified, accountable experts being truth seekers, not error spreaders. Such an act brings credibility to the gospel. After all, we worship the one who's full of truth. I really appreciated that passage from Monday. When I read it, I was thinking about having watched the hockey games on Sunday night, and then seeing the advertising. Apparently, well, in Canada, we're heading into political season. It seems into election season. In Alberta, we're having an election, a provincial election to elect our premier and the ruling party, which party will be our members of legislative assembly. And based on some of the advertising coming out on national television, I'm wondering if there's some hint that we might have a federal election sprung upon us, because one of the commercials I saw over and over and over again was a group advertising how wasteful and irresponsible our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been by taking 5 trips around the world, out of being out of the country when he should have been working, and not giving any background as to what that might be. My sense is that we're talking about things like going to the G7. He and his wife Sophie, as well as our Governor General, were at the coronation on Saturday. There have been lots of things that we expect our Prime Minister to be present for on a national or an international stage, because if they didn't, then who would be representing us? So again, we're seeing only one side of the picture, and I haven't had a chance, nor do I really want to fact check that commercial. Somebody will. Um, it's really all about hate mongering, fear mongering, and negative ad campaigns, which I think are absolute BS. I don't want to hear all kinds of negative stuff about people you don't like. That tells me more about you than it does about them. When somebody comes at me and spews things that are angry and this is how bad they are, all you're really doing is, first of all, planting seeds of doubt in my mind about you, not the person you're talking about. I'll make up my own mind about the other person. But when you start talking that way and crashing down on someone else and accusing them of being X, Y, and Z and A, B, C, and one, two, three, it really makes me think, like, what's your issue? Why are you so angry with them? What are you hiding that you're deflecting everything and pointing us over, looking at them? So I think that it kind of backfires. But it speaks to this idea that lately we have become such a world of conspiracy mongers. Whenever I think of things like the Flat Earth Society, or the issues around people believing the Earth is flat, I automatically go back hundreds and hundreds of years. I go back to before telescopes and Galileo and all of those things, before we knew, before we understood, before we could fly in a plane. Start in Halifax and end up in Edinburgh, Scotland, and vice versa. Before we could do those things, like we know that the earth is not flat. And yet, that particular conspiracy theory or that lie is being promulgated newly when we have so much that can easily just, you know, say that that's just not true. When we talk about conspiracy theories, when we buy into things that make us that feed our fear or our anger, what are we doing? We are allowing ourselves to fall into a place of despair. We are allowing ourselves to fall into a place in which we are more willing to trust those things that would actually make our lives more difficult than they would to make our lives easier. I would argue that truth will always make things easier. It may not in the right now, but in the long run. For instance, if, for instance, I went to my doctor and she said to me, "We did some blood work and your white cell count was way off base." And she says, "I want you to come back in a month and we're going to do more tests. We're going to see if this was just, maybe you were fighting an infection or maybe this is something more serious." I can walk away from my doctor and say, "Okay, yeah, whatever. I don't believe you. I think this is just you're trying to get me to, make the government spend more money on healthcare because you're gonna have me come back for tests again in a month. This is just wasting my time. You're just trying to make me fearful that I'm sick. So I'm just going to ignore this. I'm not going to come back because, heck, I'm right. I know my body. I'm not sick." Okay, that's one way of looking at it. And so I ignore that. And maybe by the way, I'm not sick. My white blood cell counts are fine, just an example. Um, but, I ignore that and I realize, that cold I had isn't going away. And I've got a wound on my hand and it's not healing properly. And after a while, I get a phone call from my doctor's office saying, "You were supposed to come in 3 months ago to have your blood work done again. Where are you?" I'm not going back. "I don't trust you. You're a quack. You don't know what you're talking about." And finally, I end up going back in because, there is something wrong. And it turns out that had I done the tests and found out that whatever was wrong with me is now so bad that it's going to be that much harder to deal with. Knowing the truth might be a difficult thing, but ignoring the truth will make something even more difficult. When we allow ourselves to fall into the trap of negative thinking, of assuming the worst about everyone or assuming that people are out to get me, because essentially that's what negative ad campaigns are for, right? Telling us this is what that person, that awful, horrible, evil person is going to do if they become your prime minister, your president, your premier, your governor, whatever the role might be. That those hate ads, those negative ad campaigns, all they are doing is really pushing hard to make sure that we feel scared and that we'll fall into line with those people who then we have given power over us. Think about it. If you are in an election period like I am right now, one of the things I'm going to do is I already know I am not going to vote UCP. I do not appreciate Danielle Smith, and I don't appreciate the policies and the decision making behind the UCP um, decisions that have been made in the last couple of years that I've been here. I am most likely going to vote for the New Democrat Party, not because they're the New Democrats, but because their policies and their procedures and the way they do things in this particular context fits closer than other groups with the way I believe and what I believe is the right way to be a Christian Canadian, taking care of each other, recognizing the need for social welfare, recognizing that we are in this together. And if we don't work together, it's all going to fall apart. That does not mean that I'm necessarily an NDP across the board, because in Alberta, it's a very specific context in which to be a party. Who knows? When the federal election comes up, I may vote a different way because the party and the policies and the way that they're speaking, if they get off the negative ad campaigns and actually started talking about what they would like to do, what their vision for our country is, maybe I would choose something different in that context. But the fact is, as Luke says, we need the facts. We need to be able to make decisions not based on fear, but based on truth. And sometimes, yeah, the truth is difficult to deal with. Like finding out that maybe your white blood cell counts are too high or too low, and maybe there's something wrong with you. But once you know that, then it gives you and the doctor opportunities to fix what's wrong with you, meaning your future won't be as difficult as it could be. The difficulty of knowing the truth is not more difficult than what knowing the truth will lead to in the end. It may be easy to pay attention to lies, to pay attention to fear mongering, to pay attention to those things that speak to the base part of who we are. But in the long run, it will be more difficult to deal with that. Give me facts, even if I don't like them, before you give me lies that make me feel good. Because in the long run, as a mature, thinking, considerate, and compassionate adult, I want what's best for myself, for my family, my friends, for my community, my country, more than I want to feel comfortable in my little, huddled up in my house, fearing what's outside my door. We need the facts. In the Gospel of Luke, that's what he tries to lay out. He says, this is what I'm doing with this. I'm interviewing people. I'm asking people, what is the truth? And he presents the truth as he understood it and as the facts of the case laid themselves out. If we all moved more to looking for facts rather than conspiracies, we would be in a much better position. We really would. I hope you have a good day, and I hope that you will use discernment as you think about what you hear, what you see, what you read, what other people share with you, what you think. Use your discernment to think, is this right? Is this appropriate? Is that really true? What part of it is true? Maybe some of it's true, but I haven't gotten all the information. Use your mind. Use your reason. God gave it to you. Go ahead and use it. Have a great day. God bless you, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.